Good evening. Hope you all can hear me.
Good evening. Here we can.
This is Rashika. I'm your class coordinator for today's IIA session. Kindly rename yourself in the Zoom account. If you all have any doubts or questions, you can drop a message to the chat box. Thank you. This is over to you, sir.
Right. Thank you. Um, so today, the topic that we are going to discuss, or I'm going to talk about, is ethics. As you know, in the syllabus, domain two looks at uh, the section is called ethics and uh, professionalism, and it's a very, very important area. Now, earlier, the Code of Ethics in the previous International Professional Practices Framework, the Code of Ethics was a separate part in the framework. Now, of course, the Code of Ethics, along with the principles, standards, all have been included in this document called the Global Internal Audit Standards. So if you look at uh, domain two, domain two looks at ethics and professionalism, right? So if you go back, the standards were effective from January 9th, 2025. On the right side, you see 2024, 2025, it was effective, launched in 2024, effective 2025. And you have these five areas. First one is the purpose of internal auditing. That's just one page. There are no principles there. And then you have the ethics and professionalism pillar, which is domain two. Domain three is about governing the internal audit function. Domain four, managing the internal audit function. And domain five, performing internal audit services. So as you can see, the 2017 IPPF included six major components, right? You have the mission, the principles, the definitions, the standards, the code of ethics, and implementation guidance. Now, all these are included in one set of standards, and we call them the GIAS, the Global Internal Audit Standards. So, apart from the standards, you have this additional area called supplemental guidance. Supplemental guidance, right? Now it's called global guidance. Earlier they called it supplemental guidance. Now they call or implementation guidance. Now they call it global guidance. So you have the global internal audit standards consisting of five domains, and you have something else called the global guidance, which provides related clarifications and best practices. Then domain five, the new IPPF includes it's the global internal audit standards that is mandatory. The global guidance is not mandatory, right? Then there is an area. So global guidance is about providing further details, further clarifications, and best practices. And then they have this thing called topical requirements. This is outside the standards. Various publications on topical requirements. That is mandatory, right? So what are the mandatory elements? That is the global internal audit standard. The topical requirements, what it means, we will discuss in 2 minutes. And then you have the global guidance, which is not mandatory. Global guidance involves non-mandatory requirements, right? This is information, additional guidance, advices, leading practices, best practices, and so on, right? Then you have topical requirements. So topical requirements enhance the consistency and quality of internal audit services, increasing the professionalism of internal auditors' performance. Right. So now there are certain topics which are very relevant when we come to internal auditing. Certain topics like cybersecurity, organizational behavior, fraud risk management. Then you have IT governance, very, very important. Privacy risk management. Then you have ESG, environmental, social, and governance related areas. These are topical areas. These are topics which are current, right? Topical means current, which are of concern which are trending now. Third party management. In organizations, we outsource a lot to third parties. Our supply chain is a third party. Right? Then you have public sector specific performance audits. So as you can see, there are various topics, topics which are relevant now, which are very important. And if you happen to audit any of these areas, you need guidance. And that guidance is given in these publications called topical requirements. So each area which I have given in yellow, right, what I marked in yellow, the IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, they have issued a publication. So there's a publication issued, I think, last year on organizational behavior. Then there is a publication issued last year on cybersecurity. And then there is a publication issued on third-party management. You can download these publications from the IIA website. Now, some of these publications which were issued last year are effective from this year. So they become effective after 6 months or so. They give a grace period. And then there are certain other areas also like fraud risk management, IT governance. So on these subjects also, they will issue publications, right? So these topical requirements. So if you happen to audit, you can see here topical requirements enhance the quality of internal audit services. If you are going to audit that area, going through the topical requirements publications on various topics or on the topic that is relevant to audit, studying it and then auditing it according to that will certainly help you to improve the quality of your internal audit. They help strengthen the relevance of internal auditing to address pervasive and evolving risks. So when they issue these topical requirements publications on various topics, those publications talk about the current issues, the current threats, evolving risks. These are pervasive issues which are affecting the profession or industry. They provide a minimum baseline. Can you see? They provide a minimum baseline and relevant criteria for a consistent, comprehensive approach to assessing the design and implementation of GRC in those areas. For example, how to improve governance processes, how to improve risk management and control processes in third-party management, in cybersecurity, in organizational behavior. So those are very relevant and those are mandatory. So this aspect you have to understand. Then this is the structure, a bit of a revision, actually. Here, as you know, there are 5 domains, 15 principles, and 52 standards. So each of these principles, these 52 standards are allocated or come under 15 principles, right? So these are the principles. You don't see the standards here. On this slide, you see the 5 domains, domain 1, domain 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you see the principles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, right? So domain 1 is the purpose of internal auditing, Domain 2, you have 5 principles, and that is what we are going to talk about today in greater length. So one principle under ethics and professionalism is integrity. Second principle is objectivity. Third principle is competency. Fourth principle is exercise due professional care. Fifth principle is confidentiality. So as you know, in the earlier code of ethics also, there were 4 principles: integrity, objectivity, competency, and confidentiality. 4 principles. But now they have introduced a new principle called exercise due professional care. Right? So that is a new principle that has come out. Now the third domain is governing the internal audit function. Fourth domain, managing the internal audit function, and the fifth domain is performing internal audit services. So if you look at the third domain, there are 3 principles because that talks about, the domain 3 basically talks about the responsibilities of the board, responsibilities of the senior management, responsibilities of the CIA in terms of governing the internal audit function. Governance is generally by the board, And they say in this section, for example, they talk about something called the internal audit charter. And inside that charter, you have a section called the internal audit mandate. Then they talk about the fact that the internal audit function should be positioned, uh, how it should be positioned. You have a what you call dual reporting line, functionally to the board, and the head reports functionally to the board audit committee and administratively to the CEO. And the fact that the function has to be overseen by the board, and what are the responsibilities of the board in terms of oversight of the function. So in the exam, if they ask you something about governing oversight role of the board, the senior management, how they should support the internal audit function, the dual control, dual reporting line, the internal audit charter mandate, all that will come in section 3 or domain 3. Right. So what is domain 4? Domain 4 basically talks about what the head of audit should do. The head of audit should prepare a strategic internal audit plan. They need to manage resources, technical, human, technological resources, human resources, and you have what are the other resources? Technological, human, and financial resources. How to manage those. Then you have communicate effectively. Communicating effectively. That's about communication. And then 12, enhancing quality. Enhancing quality. Then you have the fifth domain, domain 5, performing internal audit services. That's about plan engagements effectively, conduct engagement work, communicate engagement conclusions, and monitor action plans. Right? So those are performing. Now, if you want to get guidance on how to do the plan, the internal audit, how to carry out the field work, how to draft the report, how to communicate with the management, that will come in domain 5. It's about performing the internal audit. Managing the internal audit in terms of preparing a strategic plan, planning out the resources, communicating effectively, enhancing quality, that will come under the fourth domain. And the third domain is about governing the internal audit function, right? Domain 1, we all know what domain 1 stands for. Here we talk about internal auditing strengthens the organization's ability. So organizations exist really to create value, right? Manage, protect value, and to sustain value. Organizations can't just protect and sustain value, protect current value. They must sustain it. They must create new value, right? So your job is to strengthen the organization's ability to create value, strengthen the organization's ability to protect value, strengthen the organization's ability to sustain value. How do you do this? You have to provide the board, you have to provide the management with good advice. You have to provide them with, they say, independent, risk-based, objective assurance, advice, insight, and foresight. And all that is very, very important, right? Internal auditing strengthens the organization's ability to create value, protect value, and sustain value. And how internal auditors do that, how the internal audit function does that, is by providing the board and the senior management with very risk-based, independent, and objective advice, assurance, insight, and foresight. It is very, very important, right? Then you have domain 2, ethics and professionalism, right? So domain 2, first domain is demonstrating integrity. Second one is maintaining objectivity. Third one is demonstrating competency. Fourth is exercising due professional care. And the fifth one is maintaining confidentiality. So demonstrate integrity. What is that? And that's what we have to talk about. So under demonstrating integrity, you have 3 standards, right? Can you take about 2 minutes and go through these 5 principles and what is there in each? And then I will talk you through it. So I'll give you a minute or two just to absorb what's in the slide. All right. So honesty and professional courage is about, as an internal auditor, you must be honest. It's professional courage. You must not Section Standard 1.3 talks about you must not do anything illegal. You must not do anything unethical, right? Illegality, unethical behavior is not allowed. Then organizations' ethical expectations. As a internal auditor, if the organization is trying to do something unethical, you must not support it. So you have to support only the organization's ethical expectations. This is very, very important. Honesty and professional courage. Professional courage is something that they introduced recently. Professional courage was not there before. That means that when you are an internal auditor, you must be courageous to report certain findings, not to downgrade certain risk ratings, to give certain recommendations. The auditor has to be courageous. The auditor cannot be fearful and not do certain things, not report certain things because there is management pressure or pressure coming from executive directors. This demonstration of courage is very, very important. So you have to be honest. You must demonstrate courage. You must uh, support the organization's ethical expectations. You must you must behave legally and ethically. All that is very, very important. Then you have maintaining objectivity, right? This is about when you are an internal auditor, you must be objective. You must not allow anyone else to influence you. You must be unbiased, uninfluenced. If you need to report something, you report it. Right? You're objective. You are not subjective. That objectivity is very, very important. Safeguarding objectivity means sometimes when you do your audit work, your objectivity can be impaired. You may have to audit a department where your sister is there, family member. Then you must not ideally, you must recuse yourself from the audit. Recuse yourself from the audit. That is very, very important, right? And if there is an impairment to objectivity, you must do something to ensure that your objectivity is not impaired anymore. You must safeguard objectivity. Because sometimes when you prepare the scopes, there can be influence. When you draft reports, there can be influence. Uh, if as an internal audit, if you're asked to do managerial tasks, there can be objectivity related problems. If you're supposed to be the internal audit and the storekeeper, then there your objectivity will be affected. So there are so many things when it comes to objectivity. And if there is an impairment to objectivity, that means your objectivity is affected, then you must disclosing impairments to objectivity is also important. You must tell the board, tell the chief internal auditor or the board that your objectivity is impaired. Disclosing impairment is also very, very important. Demonstrate competency. What is that? Internal auditors apply the knowledge, skills, and abilities to fulfill their roles and responsibilities successfully. That means, as internal auditors, we have a responsibility to be skilled, to be experienced. If you're not an IAS auditor, don't do an IAS audit. If you don't have knowledge about treasury functions, don't do a treasury audit. You have a responsibility to lift, upskill or reskill yourself as your job, your role and responsibility demands. And then getting a degree or getting a certification in when you were younger is in itself not sufficient. Maybe at that point in time, you have to continuously upgrade your knowledge. Continuous professional development is very, very important, right? So you have to think about all these things. Then exercise due professional care. This is something new that was introduced with the new standards. This is the standard which tells you basically that you must apply due professional care in performing, planning and performing internal audit services, right? So internal auditors apply due professional care in planning and performing internal audit services. So conformance with global internal audit standards is very, very important. That means when you do your work, if you are expected to exercise due professional care, you have to follow the standards, conform with the standards, right? So due professional care, professional skepticism is very, very important. So conformance with global internal due professional care, professional skepticism. Use of information, protection of information is the last one. Sorry, second one is professional skepticism. That also now they have brought it in the form of a standard. So great emphasis is placed. Early it was kind of explicit. Now it's implicitly stated. Early it was implicit. Now it's explicitly stated and brought in as a separate standard. This is where when companies go down or face bankruptcy, what happens is there is profession. The auditors have not been quizzical. They have not been curious. When they see certain red flags, they don't question. So professional skepticism is all about having a questioning mind, being quizzical, not trusting. You verify through documents, right? All this is very, very important. Conformance with global internal standards, due professional care, and professional skepticism. Maintaining confidentiality. Internal auditors use and protect information appropriately. Use of information and protection of information. So this is very, very important. Because when you carry out an audit, you're supposed to expect it to maintain confidentiality. So you use a lot of information. You need to protect that information. You need to take steps, maybe technological solutions, encryption, passwords, logical access controls. You have to protect the information. You can't just collect and just let it be there. It can be in your laptops, in your cupboards. You have a role responsibility to protect the confidentiality of the information. It can be personally identifiable information, or it could be what you call sensitive information like pricing, vendor master file, or your sales ledger, or your uh, customer list, or something like that, or a strategic plan. And how to use the information, not use it for economic or personal or economic enrichment. That you shouldn't do, right? So these are some of the things that you have to be careful about. So this standard looks at domain 2, ethics and professionalism, and it has 5 principles, right? At the exam, you will be tested on this: integrity, objectivity, competency, then confidentiality, and the new principle, due professional care. And then you have honesty and professional courage with organizations' ethical expectations, legal and ethical behavior, individual objectivity, safeguarding objectivity, disclosing impairments to objectivity. Then competency and continuing professional development, conformance with global intelligence standards, due professional care, and professional skepticism, use of information, protection of information. So this is very, very important. So domain 3, I earlier spoke to you about this. Let's take a minute or two and go through this domain. Domain 3. All right. So domain three, uh, uh, pillar principle six is authorized by the board. So board establishes, approves and supports the mandate of the internal function. So you're supposed to have, the department is supposed to have an internal audit mandate. It's supposed to have an internal audit charter and board and senior management support. That is very, very important. We discussed those things earlier. Then they say under the domain three governing the internal audit function, not only should it be authorized by the board, as stated in principle six, it must be positioned independently. The board establishes and protects the internal audit function's independence and qualifications. So organizational independence, chief audit executive's qualification. So organizational independence is 7.1 and 7.2 is about chief audit executive qualifications. Then you have overseen by the board, right? The function should not only be authorized and positioned independently, it must be overseen by the board continuously. So the CIE has to interact with the board. The function or the department must be sufficiently resourced, and quality must be maintained, and external quality assessments once in 5 years need to be done. Right? So all those things are talked about. So in this domain three, in every standard, right? In domain three has how many standards? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 standards. There is a section called essential conditions. In every standard, it's there. Right? In every standard, that section is there. It's very, very important. Then you have domain four, managing the internal audit function. The domain four is managing the internal audit function. Plan strategically, manage resources, communicate effectively, enhance quality. So here, as you can see, you're supposed to, internal audit, chief audit executive is supposed to plan the audits for the year strategically. Then what you have to do is given in standard 9.1, how you need to understand the existing governance, risk management and control processes, how you need to develop an internal audit strategy, the methodologies, the tools, techniques you have to use, then the planning, you have to come out with a document called the internal audit plan, and then there's a whole lot of coordination and reliance on various assurance sources. I mean, some could be external auditing, health and safety audits, IT audits, to coordinate all this. This principle 10 is about managing the resources. The chief audit executive manages resources to implement the internal audit functions, strategy, and achieves its plan and mandate. So here you talk about the financial resource management, human resource management, and technological resources. 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3. Financial, HR, and technological resources, because all these things must be planned out. Then communicating effectively. This is about how the internal function needs to communicate effectively with its stakeholders, not only the audit committee, you have the director board, you have the audit committee, you have the senior management, you have the regulator, you have employees, you have heads of department. How you communicate with them is very, very important. Then quality pillar, enhancing quality. So you have internal quality assessments, which are, when you do an internal audit, certain things are already embedded, like the planning, the progress reviews, the supervision, the monitoring, the review by the manager or the head of audit prior to issuing the draft reports. So there is quality control embedded when you normally do the audit. So you have ongoing monitoring, as well as you have something called peer review, that is maybe periodically one manager can review the other manager's files and do a kind of a quality assessment. So that's internal. That is generally done every year. It's done. Ongoing review, of course, happens as part of the audit. Peer reviews kind of happen. Maybe once a year, they review a few files, managers swap their files, review and then give the findings. Then apart from that, you have the external quality assessment. External quality assessment. The external quality assessment is something that you do once in 5 years, right? Once in 5 years. So oversee and improve engagement performance. So those are the standards. So managing the internal audit function, which is the final domain, domain 4, has four principles, and a whole lot: 5, 3, 8, 8 and 5, 13, 13 and 3, 16 standards. So it's huge. So this is managing. And then the final domain is 5, performing internal audit services. This is how you apply, how you plan the audit, how you plan the audit, how you do the audit. So domain 5 is really relevant to you. Not as maybe the chief head of internal audit. These are the areas which are relevant to the head, because these are the responsibilities of the head. These are the responsibilities of the domain 3 of the board and senior management. These are the responsibilities of the head mainly. The domain 5 talks about each and every internal auditor. These sections or these standards in the section 13, principle 14 and principle 15. These are really important for these domains. Right. Can you just take a minute or two and just read this, please? 13, planning engagements effectively. Internal auditors plan each engagement using systematic, disciplined approach. Then there are 13 standards, the 6 standards under that. Then you have conducting section, principle 14, conducting the internal audit. That is the field work. How you gather information, how you evaluate findings, how you put in recommendations, action plans, conclusions, documentation, and all that. Then you have 15, final engagement communication and confirming the implementation of recommendations actions. Right? Then we move on to the core principles in ethical professional conduct. Before we do that, I want you to just take a minute or two and absorb what's in this standard. So now let us look at the core principles in ethical professional conduct, right? So we looked at it already, but we had to go into further details. The code of ethics is a set of principles and rules that guide the professional behavior and conduct of internal auditors. So they are basically a set of behavioral standards, how you should behave, right? That's what is there in that, how we should behave. So they guide our professional behavior and conduct as internal auditors. So here on the right side, you have the five principles: integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, competence, due professional care. Those are some of the five principles when it comes to the code of ethics, right? The purpose of the IIA's code of ethics, as you know, is to promote an ethical culture in internal audit. So, like the company itself, you have a department or a function, and then you're expected to maintain an ethical culture within your department where everyone is acting with honesty and integrity, everyone is competent in their respective to perform or discharge their respective responsibilities. Then you build trust and credibility, right? Because if you act ethically, if you then it helps to build trust and credibility in what you do. People will begin to trust you more, and and your reports will all be more credible, right? Guiding auditors in resolving ethical dilemmas. Guide auditors in resolve ethical dilemmas and ensure professional discipline. So sometimes as auditors, we face various dilemmas, an ethical situation. Should I do this? Should I do that? Shouldn't I do it? Then by looking at the standards in domain two, that will guide you and help you to make the right decision sometimes, right? So that helps. Ensure professional discipline and accountability, right? Ensure professional discipline and accountability is also very, very important. So this we already discussed. Because why domain two is very important? Why is this domain called ethics and professional important? Because they have seen that in most organizations when there are failures, uh, that is because the auditors also have not acted ethically or courageously. Some audits are not very effective because the auditor is not courageous. The auditor is not objective. The auditor hasn't exercised professional skepticism adequately or sufficiently. Why domain 2 is critical? Another reason is it protects independence and trust. It protects independence and trust. And then, because if you are to protect your independence as a function, right, the code of ethics, those principles must be followed. And then people will trust you. And at the end of the day, it helps you to support the governance and be more accountable for what you do. So these are the basically the five principles: 2.1, 2.2, competence, due professional care, and confidentiality. We discussed it. So let's take the first standard. Now, what I want you to do is I want you, before I explain the standard, I want you to take a minute or two and try to read what you see, right? Um, Internal auditors must display honesty, courage, and responsibility. Truthful reporting. That is all about, when you're reporting something, make it factual and be truthful. Be truthful. Don't lie. Don't suppress or omit or distort facts. Your observations should be complete, accurate, objective. So, truthful reporting, no suppression or distortion of facts is very, very important. Resist pressure to alter findings. Someone might pressure you to alter this, alter that. Don't do this. Don't don't give in to that. Escalate issues appropriately. Sometimes you have to escalate issues to the board, to the senior management, to your head of audit. Ensure that you escalate. Document interference. Someone is interfering with your tasks. Document that. That's very, very important. Then you go to the next section. Internal auditor should disclose material facts. Can you see? Be truthful, clear, accurate, respectful, and do the right thing even in difficult situations. Organizations must support ethical behavior. Organizations must support ethical behavior through training, mentoring, CPD, and supervision. Internal auditors must understand, meet, respect, and contribute to ethical expectations and behavior. Organizations may try to do unethical things sometimes, but you must understand and contribute only towards an ethical objectives. And you also have a duty to behave legally and ethically. So integrity out of all these principles is the foundation for other principles. It's on this that the other principles are built on. Now what I want you to do is I want you to read this little bit, right? Here's a little bit I want you to read. What is in this table? Aspect and description. Can you just read that? Take a minute or two. Especially the examples is very important. All right. So WB policy is the whistleblowing policy. Yeah. So sometimes anonymity has to be maintained. Hmm. Second standard. Let's go into this a little bit. Objectivity. What is that? Avoiding conflicts of interest, avoiding self-review threats. Some data. Then familiarity with management. You have to be careful when you to get too close to the management sometimes. Familiarity bills, that could be an issue. Accepting gifts and hospitality sometimes, you go and accept the material gifts or entertainment or hospitality. That could affect your objectivity or threaten your objectivity. Then prior operational role, sometimes let's say you were in the procurement department and after 3 months you are shifted to the internal audit and you're asked to do an audit of the procurement department. So until there is a kind of a 12-month cooling off period, you cannot accept that role, right? You cannot audit an area for which you were responsible functionally, operationally until 12 months lapse. So on the right side, you get interlocutors must maintain impartial judgment, impartial mindset, and avoid conflicts of interest. Interlocutors should recognize, mitigate, and disclose impairments to objectivity. There are actual impairments, potential impairments, or perceived impairments. Right? Disclosing of impairments. There are actual impairments to objectivity or potential impairments or perceived. Actually, it's not there, but people can perceive it as an impairment. Then you need to disclose those impairments. Biases, self-review, familiarity, prejudice, unconscious. There can be biases, sometimes when you do things, you might be biased. You're preparing the accounts and you're auditing the accounts also. So there's self-review threat. You can't prepare what you're examining and auditing. No? It's called self-review threat. Familiarity means you're too familiar with the management. You've done an audit maybe for 5, 6 years continuously, and it's time you got rotated. And in your mind also, you may have unconscious biases which you need to address. Internal auditors can review, recommend, but not design and draft. It's very, very important. Unbiased mental attitude that allows to make professional judgments, sound decisions, fulfill the responsibilities, obligations, and achieve the purpose of internal audit without subordinating your judgment. Some things you might not let management do, you're responsible for your report. So you have to make all the judgments appropriately. Ensures credibility and fairness in audit findings. Right? That is very, very important. Examples, avoiding conflicts of interest, including adherence to cooling off periods. Cooling off, as I mentioned, 12 months. Providing advisory services. Sometimes if you provide advisory services on the internal controls in the ERP system, you can't be in the same team that goes and audits it afterwards. That's an impairment. So to be very, very careful. Not accepting physical or non-physical benefits, change findings, conclusion, results, and not supported by evidence. So whatever you conclusions, findings must be supported by factual evidence. It's very, very important. Right. And so that's what subjectivity is all about. Competence. Know your limitations, some things you can't do, sometimes things you are not skilled enough to do. Seek specialist support when needed. Seek specialist support when needed. Competencies in fraud, important, technology and AI, cybersecurity, ESG, and sustainability. These are very, very important. Competency. Internal auditors must possess or acquire the necessary skills, knowledge, abilities, and expertise. Continuous CPD, you're supposed to have 40 hours a year of CPD, 40 hours, including 2 hours in ethics. Right? So, what sort of self-study or workshops or seminars or mentorships, education, certifications, all these are very, very helpful. The chief audit executive has a bit of a responsibility here. That is to ensure the audit team and function are adequately skilled and trained as per the internal audit charter and support the efforts outsource. Definition, possessing and developing necessary knowledge and skills. Ensures effective and accurate audit performance. And then examples. Areas that you need to, learn and keep yourself abreast of. So can you read this example section? There's some are hard skills, some are soft skills. New professional care. Hmm. This is the new principle that was introduced. Leaders must take great care along with sound judgment and critical thinking. That means when we are analyzing something, our critical thinking, our analytical thinking, all that is important. We have to do it in such a way where we are uh, exercising professional skepticism also to the degree that is required. Sufficient sampling, sufficient testing, responsive to risk, it must be risk based, right? We review processes from a risk angle. If we see red flags or fraud indicators, we have to follow up on it. Avoid over reliance on explanations. Avoid over reliance on explanations. Escalate scope limitations. Right. Avoid over reliance on explanations and escalate scope limitations. This is very, very important. We have scope limitations. Take it up the hierarchy. Don't rely purely on explanations. Get management representations or in writing written representations. Check to see through documents whether what they are saying is correct or not. Right? That's important. Applying sound judgment and professional skepticism. Questioning. Information that is submitted for your review. You must evaluate information critically. Evaluate information critically based on facts and logic and not just on trust and belief. Based on facts and logic and not just on trust and belief. Improves audit quality and reliability. Improves audit quality and reliability. Examples: thorough planning, critical evaluation, adherence to global international standards. All that is very, very important. Confidentiality. Hmm. The fifth pillar. What does this talk about? This says that the internal auditors must protect confidential information, proprietary information, or information that belongs to the organization, like intellectual property, and personally identifiable information, PII, and use it only for professional purposes, not for personal benefits or to harm the organization. They must follow laws, regulations, organizational policies regarding data handling. Unauthorized disclosure or misuse of information is strictly prohibited, right? Protecting and properly using sensitive information that are in paper or digital forms. I come from verbal discussions. We protect information, block it, right? This is very, very important. So whistleblower protection is very, very important. Data security, that's about logical access controls, encryptions, password protections, and all that. If someone disclosure requests can be made by outside parties, you have to be careful before you disclose it. Look at the sensitivity of the information. Even after you resign from your role, you need to protect the confidentiality of information. The responsibility to protect the information goes beyond your employment contract. Um, Detecting and properly using sensitive information that are in paper or digital formats or come from verbal assurance is verbal discussions is very important. Preserves trust and prevents legal fines, reputational harms. There are data protection acts and all that. Insider trading, so to be very, very careful about divulging. Secure sensitive data, handling at every stage. Safeguards include encryption, password protection, restrictions on email distribution, limits on social media usage, physical access restrictions. You have to be very, very careful. Unauthorized disclosure, both within and outside, or misuse of information is strictly prohibited. Can you see? Role of the CA, set an ethical tone. That is the department. You have responsibility to set the tone. Ensure independence of your staff. Protect your audit staff always. Audit committee must safeguard independence. If someone is trying to influence the department, you have to ensure that they are independent. And support ethical reporting. This is very, very important. Training and mentorship. You have to do ethics related education and workplace guidance. This is crucial. For internal auditors also, you have to provide training for them at onboarding, refresher sessions, and guide them. Have SOPs for your department, guiding them and coaching them and mentoring them. Mentorships are important. Policies and procedures. Organizations should have clear methodologies for handling ethical issues and impairments, right? Supervision and review, regular performance evaluations and feedback help reinforce ethical standards. So, performance evaluations, the best time to do it is after an audit. Must quickly give the feedback to your employees so that they know how to do the audit. Because sometimes when your employees, your interlocutors don't do audits, it's because of uh, deficiency in their ethical behavior, not because of their technical skills. They are either not competent enough, that is also ethical. No, competence is ethical thing. They are not courageous enough, or they are not exercising professional skepticism. So most of the drawbacks or deficiencies in internal auditing is traced now to the behavior of auditors, the ethical behavior of auditors, not to the non-ethical behavior of auditors. That's very, very important. Right? Security measures, use of encryption, access controls, secure communication channels to protect information. All that is very, very important. So let us now discuss last section. When we finish this section on ethics, the next section on theory is on risk management. That will take about 2 classes, and then um, we move on to questions. So 2 more classes, and then we move on to questions. And the next 2 classes will be mainly on risk management. And then we'll have about 3, 4 classes, questions classes, and with that, you should now slowly target to do your exam. Now we are in in April. End April would be a nice time, or early May, for those of you who are keen on doing exam, that will be ideal time. So now here what we are going to do is management pressure to suppress findings. You always feel these are ethical dilemmas faced by staff. The CA is asked by the CEO to suffer adverse findings to avoid regulator attention. So according to the standard 2.1, you're supposed to uphold truthful reporting. Objectivity requires you to not be influenced by others, resist undue influence, and then we'll escalate it to the audit committee also. First, of course, to the chief internal auditor, to your boss, if you're an internal auditor, and then through the CIA, it will be escalated to the audit committee if it cannot be resolved. Right? The next one, auditing areas of prior responsibility. So you're now in finance or procurement, and you're shifted to the internal audit department. That happens in certain organizations where employees are moved about. And then you're asked to do an audit. So ideally, you should wait for 12 months. You can't audit an area for which even after 12 months, you can't audit an area if you were responsible. For example, if they go back 2 years sampling, then your samples are there, your transactions. So generally, you audit 1 year back, no? So if you were in audit until 12 months, or you use a different auditor, there are impairments to objectivity. For you, they just swap you and put another person into that audit and get it done. Right? So an auditor reviews a function they managed 6 months earlier. So declare the conflict immediately. The auditor has a responsibility to raise the hand and say, I was in that department. The head should know, but then again, it's your responsibility to disclose any impairments to your objectivity. And then the head of audit will reassign audit or reassign the audit. And if there's no one else to reassign it to or put, they can outsource the audit to an outside party. Pressure to delay reporting. Sometimes, due to your increments or bonuses, they might try to delay giving management comments and hence delay the entire audit report. So then what do you do? Hmm. Pressure to delay reporting sensitive issues until after public announcement. Prioritize duty to board over management loyalty. Prioritize duty to board over management loyalty. That is very, very important. Prioritize report duty to board over management loyalty. That's very important. You have to report your duty to report it to the board. Gifts hospitality. Sometimes when you go on audits, you receive gifts. Auditor offers travel and hospitality during the audit. So refuse the benefit and disclose. Not only refuse, you have to disclose it also. So refuse, but refusing alone is not enough. There's a responsibility to disclose it. It's important to your superior. Audit committee demands whistleblower identity. Audit committee demands whistleblower identity. Sometimes when a whistle is blown, then audit committee asks who disclosed it, who said it. So then you have to protect identity. So protect source identity, report facts only. That's very important. Competence gaps in advanced audits. You're asked to do a auditing review an AI system, and we don't have the skills to do this. Should you undertake it? Should you remove it from the audit plan? No, you can still do it, right? So these are what I'm doing now is I'm basically helping you to answer questions on ethics. Because at the exam, you will see questions on these 10 areas. You might see, you may see. If you do see, to engage specialists, disclose limitations. This is very important. Audit team lacks. So disclose the limitation also. Don't just accept the audit, disclose it. Management explanations accepted without evidence. Management explanations accepted. So you have a finding or an observation, and then management gives you some sort of an explanation for it, and you just accept it. You can't do that. You can't trust. You can't over rely on management representations. They must verbal representations, no way. They must give it in writing first. Second, apply professional skepticism. Applying professional skepticism is very important. Obtain corroborative evidence. That means if you are told something verbally, check it through a document, confirm it through documents. If you ask the same question from two people and they give you two different answers, don't just wait, find out what has happened. Find out, go after the truth. It's important. Resource constraints and scope limitations. Hmm. You're doing an audit and the management tells you don't do these audit procedures or remove these areas from the audit scope, or they don't provide you with access to employees, or they don't provide you with access to information or people, then you can't just wait. Escalate constraints, prioritize risk over efficiency. Okay. Form auditor uses confidential insights in consulting work. So I'm now an auditor and I leave my employment and I'm in working in another company and I'm using confidential insights, I mean, proprietary information, personally identifiable information, sensitive information. I'm disclosing it to my new employer. We have to be very careful. Ethical courage and retaliation. Auditor fears retaliation for reporting senior management misconduct. Auditor fears retaliation for reporting senior management misconduct. Act with professional courage. Use formal escalation channels. So that's where when you are doing a audit and you report something where the management is also implicated, then you fear that the management will cut your salaries or will not promote you or something. That's why as an auditor, you report directly to the functionally to the audit committee where you're protected from all these. So in such a situation, you have to act with professional courage. Use formal escalation channels. You have to escalate it to the audit committee and, all that is important. All right. I think that's the last. So can you go through this last? I think you have, a few more. So we've gone through a few common ethical challenges. We've discussed the importance of professional judgment, strong ethical frameworks. Ethical framework would be for us this domain too. And when you do audit, it's all about your professional judgment, no? Everything comes down to your judgment, your sampling, how many to sample, how many transactions to test. Everything comes down to that. You make a lot of professional judgments in your audit, from planning, scoping, carrying out fieldwork, drafting observations, risk rating, all the recommendations. You must exercise your professional judgment wisely, judiciously. Because if you act unethically, it can harm your credibility and damage trust between auditors and stakeholders. Internal auditors must be equipped to assess, identify, and respond to ethical challenges effectively. Definition of conflict. Conflicts of interest arise when auditors have personal or financial stakes in the audit areas impacting objectivity. Examples of conflicts. Examples include auditing former departments, activities previously managed by the auditor, which we discussed, accepting gifts. These might all be a conflict of interest. So that's why you need to have conflicts of interest policies. So most organizations have a conflict of interest policy. It's very, very important. Importance of code of ethics in GIAs. Ensures good governance, reduces fraud and corruption, enhances audit quality, strengthens internal control system, and builds stakeholder confidence. Consequences of violating the code. disciplinary action can be taken by the IIA. Loss of professional membership, legal consequences, damage to professional reputation. It's very, very important. Your professional reputation can be damaged. So key takeaways: ethics are mandatory. Domain 2 is part of the standards, and standards are mandatory. Courage, this new concept which we all know of, heard of, we embody. We have to uh, exercise it more freely, and be courageous. Domain 2, which is ethics and professionalism, underpins all assurance. And domain 2 ensures internal audit remains a trusted pillar of governance. All right. So that's today's presentation. And do you have any questions that you would like to ask? The next presentation is on risk management. It'll take about 2 lessons. And then we move on to a few questions. The Academy also has a questions database which you could access remotely and start doing questions. So use it, utilize it. Then there are also 3 mock exams. If you pass them, you get a certificate from the Academy. You can get the details from the Academy of Finance. Do you have any questions? If not, we can close it for the day. All right. Thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you next Friday. Thank you. Sorry about having to shift the class today. There's a recording for those who have missed. You can convey the message that they can watch the recording. Thank you.